Every unspoken word in a business relationship is costing you something. And surprisingly, most breakdowns are caused by the things that were never said at all. Thank you for listening to Routine is Revenue. It's your place to build routines and bank results. I'm Ildiko, and I'm a routine and performance strategist. I help business owners manage themselves and their relationships so that communication builds trust rather than eroding it. This episode is for you if you find that professional relationships sometimes break down in ways you did not see coming. And if you are ready to look honestly at how you communicate, how you handle conflict, and how you hold your own boundaries, let's go. In this routine reset, we look at relational health, the communication, conflict handling, and boundary setting that determine whether your professional relationships support your business or quietly undermine it. So here is something that took me years to understand fully. Work relationships and work relationship breakdowns are communication breakdowns. Not disagreements of value, not even incompatibility of personalities, which is quite surprising, because you can actually agree to disagree. But maybe a message that was never sent, or certainly a boundary that was never named, or an expectation that was assumed rather than stated. So for us entrepreneurs in business, this plays out constantly. Have you had a client who went quiet because a conversation felt uncomfortable and nobody addressed it? How about a collaborator who drifted because the terms of the relationship were never made explicit? And how about a team member of yours who disengaged because feedback arrived too late or even the wrong way? And the cost of our business is not just practical. Every single unresolved relational tension takes up cognitive and emotional space. It just sits in the background of your mind, drawing on your energy and shaping your decisions in ways you may not even notice on a day-to-day basis. So in last week's episode with Donna Bentley-Carr, we talked about how her burnout crept up over 6 months, precisely because the communication in her workplace had broken down completely. She stopped adding her voice, she stopped advocating, and instead, she ended up internalizing everything. But what was worse, that nobody named what was happening, neither her colleagues nor herself. So consequently, that silence compounded into a burnout so severe that she couldn't even get out of bed. While a clear, direct conversation at any point in those 6 months could have just changed everything and prevented this happening. So relational health in business comes down to 3 practices: clear communication, conscious conflict, and deliberate boundaries. So let's go through each of them. Now, clear communication means stating exactly what you mean, checking what was heard, and not leaving things unsaid because the conversation feels uncomfortable. It's important to know that most relational tension is not resolved by a difficult conversation. It's actually prevented by one. The next one is conscious conflict, which may sound counterproductive, but it just simply means that you are approaching a disagreement as information rather than a threat. So when a relationship hits friction, that friction is telling you something. It's telling you about misaligned expectations, about unmet needs, about a boundary that was not named early enough. And it may sound obvious, but in the situation, it's probably not. So let's highlight it. Conflict handled well actually strengthens a relationship. It's quite liberating, isn't it? Because on the flip side, conflict avoided weakens the relationship, and that may happen slowly and invisibly. And then the third relational health practice, boundaries. Now, just realize that they are not walls. They provide clarity. Clarity for knowing what you will and will not do. Clarity for what you need from a professional relationship to function well within it, both you and who is the other part of the relationship. And being able to state the things without apology. So what's worth noting is that boundaries actually protect both parties. They create the conditions for sustainable and functional relationships rather than the ones that work only until they don't. And all three of these are skills that can be learned and built. Only they require practice, just like everything else. And they are directly supported by the emotional literacy work we covered in Routine Reset number 7. You cannot communicate clearly from an unregulated emotional state. Now, the story I wanted to share with you here is my own, and I hope you don't mind. I think it sort of earned its place here. A little forewarning, I will strip my emotions bare. So years ago, something like 15 years ago now, I was working in a role where I served 2 teams, and I asked the senior manager to follow and establish a procedure, but she didn't like it. What followed was a sequence of events that led me losing my job. Then my immediate line manager wanted to keep me on, but the senior manager vetoed it. And then to top it all, my agent read me her exact words, which were something along the lines that I should not be employed by the company under any circumstances again. Now, as you can imagine, that was an extraordinarily painful thing to hear, and it knocked me hard. And for a while, I experienced depression for the first time ever, for real. But what I know now is that the situation failed because communication had never been functional. No one had ever said clearly what the boundaries were at work, what the expectations were, or what the consequences were for challenging the hierarchy. It was all assumed. And on my part, that I wasn't just a number. That's what I assumed. You see, assumptions are where professional relationships will collapse. So all I can do now is just thank her for being a bitch, and I can tell you that being removed from that position led directly to everything I've built since. My designer degree, my creative career, my teaching degree, and then eventually this business and the life that actually fits who I am. And my clearest takeaway, if there had been honest, direct communication on both sides, none of that would have had to happen the way it did. So the lesson learned is that communication is not a soft skill. It's the infrastructure of every professional relationship you will ever have. So let's have a look at what happens if relational patterns stay as they are. Yeah, you can keep managing the tensions. You can keep working around the difficult conversations. And you can definitely keep absorbing the low-level friction of those relationships that are just functional, but not fully healthy. But what happens over time, that cost accumulates. Not in dramatic ruptures, but in the slow drain of energy spent managing what was never resolved. And in the opportunities that do not arrive because the relationship never quite depended on trust. So when you are scaling a business, that is a leadership cost too. Because businesses reflect the relational quality of the person at the top. And if the communication is guarded, then the culture becomes guarded too. And if the boundaries are unclear, guess what? The whole system becomes unclear. While clear, honest relationships are simply not a nice to have in business. They are a structural component of a healthy business. So when do you commit to the communication practices that your business relationships deserve? Do you think it's before the tension becomes a rupture in that relationship? Or perhaps is it when the silence becomes permanent? Well, the best time to commit to good communication practices is definitely before it gets urgent. And that time is right now. So now, if this has made you think of a relationship or a conversation that needs attention, your next step is simple. I'm leading the Routine Revolution, and as part of my 52 to 52 campaign, I'm offering one complimentary private routine audit conversation every week for 52 weeks from April. And in those hour-long audits, we look at your full temple of health for wealth, including the emotional health pillar, which we talked about today, and within that, the relational health that determine how sustainably you lead your business. So please visit routinerevolution.co.uk to register your interest. And most importantly, look after your emotional health. Say the things that needs to be said, because your relationships we'll be stronger for it. And remember, a healthier you makes a wealthier you.